talk about how to prep in those 4 minutes if you do not have a good card, if you don't have really any information whatsoever, or if you just don't have a card and you have no idea what it's about. If you have no idea what the importance of being earnest is about and you have to give a speech on it, here are some tips. Let's start off with the first one. Always have synopses. Now I know some of you are saying, well, this is supposed to be a lecture on what to do when you don't have cards, and your solution is to always have cards. Yeah, that is absolutely my solution. The best way to prevent getting in a situation where you do not have cards is to have cards. It hardly takes any effort to compile just synopses together for a topic, just a quick summary of what a topic is about. Now, I'm not saying that you should always have your complete cards, like with the bridge, 3-part worldview, the quotes or scriptures. You don't have to have all of that. All I'm saying is just literally go online, search synopsis for this. Even if it's awful, just copy paste it onto a piece of paper and have it. You should always have a synopsis before you get to a tournament. It should take you like 3 hours max to get all of them if you're being super efficient in the way that you do it. So, all I'm saying is start by making sure that you have synopses for all of them. Just like, it doesn't really matter how long, just make sure there's some kind of description about what the topic is. Start with that. The best way to prep for not having a card is making sure that you have at least some information on everything. If you're not going to have a full card, if you're not going to have your 3-part worldview, if you're not going to have all your quotes and scriptures, you're not going to have your bridge, make sure that you at least have some information that you can use. So if you get the importance of being earnest, you at least have a synopsis to be able to talk about what it's about, even if you don't have any other information on it. In fact, towards the end of the year, I had thought through a lot of the topics in Mars Hill, so my binder was actually mostly just synopses. I already had the 3 parts of the worldview. I already had the bridge in my head. I had some quotes and scriptures memorized. I might have a quote or 2 written down, but for the most part, it was just synopses. The reason why is because as long as you can understand what a topic is, you can give a speech on it. So make sure that you at least have the minimal threshold before you get into a round. You don't have to fill in everything, just start with a little. Just start with a little bit of information, a little bit of a summary about what it is. You don't even have to have a short synopsis. Again, you can just copy, paste it down. Especially a lot of the early tournaments are going to tell you what topics they're going to use. I know Cactus Splash did that last year, Coyote Kickoff did that. And I know we planned it so that our Mars Hill topics categories wouldn't be the same 3 categories theirs were. So you can just kind of, before that tournament, if you haven't written your cards by then, just do the summaries for just those 3 categories. Start with a little bit, just get a little bit of information, and maybe expand your knowledge, expand how good your cards is. Makes sense. Cards are a little bit later. Secondly, take the time to understand. Let's say that you do the first step, and you have synopses for everything, but you still don't really understand what a topic is about. Take the time to understand it. Sometimes you won't have an expansive card, or your summary won't make much sense to you. Sometimes you won't have much information, you won't have much ability to make things make sense to you, or your card just won't have a lot of information. You'll have like a 2-sentence synopsis, and you'll be like, oh, well, I don't really get it. I thought this was about like a tiger, but actually it's not. I don't know what that was, but yeah, basically. Oh yeah, another one I never gave a speech on. Okay. Sometimes you will not have a lot of information. If you don't have a lot of information or your information is not good, it is okay to slow down and prep. I know that sounds kind of scary, and just take the time to understand it. Take the time to understand the topic so you actually know what you're talking about. Take the time to understand the topic, don't rush to the next step. If you don't have a lot of information, that does not mean that you just get to jot down like 2 words on your card and then move on and stress about it for the rest of the day. No, what you want to do is you want to sit there, you want to force yourself to think through it, try to understand it as much as possible, and make sure that you at least have some bearing, some intellectual bearing on what you're going to talk about. You lose a lot of credibility by not understanding the topic. I'm not going to tell that story, I'm too embarrassed. Okay. You lose a lot of credibility when you have no idea what a topic is. You also lose a lot of credibility if you don't quite understand what a topic is about. For instance, if you give a speech on the Newsies and you kind of forget that it ends in a really depressing manner, talk about the happy ending. Judges are going to be like, okay, whatever you say, buddy. Make sure you take the time to understand a plot, read through the whole synopsis. If you haven't watched it, if you aren't familiar with it, if you haven't read through the card, make sure you take the time to understand it. Thirdly, tie stronger to Christianity. If you do not have much information on the topic, then that just means that you have more time to tie it to Christianity and be like, Bible judge. Not having much information on the topic means you have more time to talk about the Christian worldview. If you don't have a lot of information, that means you're not going to have as much time talking about the topic or the topic theme in your speech, which means you're going to have more time both in prep and in your speech to talk about a Christian worldview, to talk about what you think the most important part of your faith is, or to just stand up there and talk to a judge about the hope that you have or the belief that you have. Find the opportunity in every difficulty. I talked to you guys last week, those of you who were here for Extemp Camp, I talked to you about how Winston Churchill always said that a pessimist was the one who sees the difficulty in every opportunity, and an optimist is the one who sees the opportunity in every difficulty. Not having information on a topic is a difficulty. So at least try to get something out of it. At least try to find some form of opportunity once you get in that situation. Tie it stronger to Christianity. Make sure the link to Christian worldview is even more strong, because a lot of you guys have grown up in Christian families, you've gone to church your whole life, you have a lot of information in your head already about Christian worldview. You have a lot of information, even if you don't do much study outside of Mars Hill, you will still have a lot of information in your head about your faith. Even if you just pay some attention to your pastor on Sunday, you'll be able to talk about something. So make sure that you tie it stronger to Christianity, that this Christian worldview becomes the most important part of your speech. If you don't have a card at all, expand more on the impacts of a Christian worldview. Say, look, it's important to be earnest. Importance of being earnest, no idea what it's about, not going to butcher it, not going to make somebody stab me in the back. So, it's important to be earnest in our faith. That whole speech was about Christian worldview. Because of that, I had the ability to impact that Christian worldview. I had the ability to say, okay, yeah, this is what this worldview means. This is how this worldview matters to us. This is how we can see this worldview in our life. That is the only reason I was able to rescue that speech at all. Now, I do not recommend doing that regularly, because if I had all three judges instead of just one who knew what the importance of being earnest was about, they would have been like, okay, goodbye. So don't do that regularly, but if you do find yourself in that very, very unfortunate situation, then make the most of it. Make the most of explaining what you do know. Always go back to what you do know. I know my grandpa is an attorney, and he did trial work for a while, and he always told me that one of the most important things you do is not to focus on what you don't know, it's to focus on what you do. Focus on what you do know. Focus on the things you do understand, the things you do have some context or information for, and expand on those more. Fourth, aim for simplicity. If you don't have much information, then you're not going to be able to give a really complex speech, or you're not going to be able to give a really in-depth analysis, so just try to be simple. Be simple in your approach. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Don't try to tell the judge, if you don't have much information, how The Dark Knight Rises is actually a movie with a Christian worldview. Which, if you think about it for about 7 hours and have a conversation with your film and worldview teacher about it, you realize that it is. But that's going to be more than you can chew. You're going to have more information. You're going to have more to do there than you have the information to be able to accomplish. So make sure you don't go too far. Make sure that you are simple in how you approach it. You already have things working against you. Don't exacerbate that. Don't make things worse by trying to make it more complicated on yourself. Don't make your difficult situation more difficult on yourself, because then that's just not good. And that will make you cry, and crying is bad. Generally, guys, just so you know, crying in prep time is not advisable. I haven't done it. I've seen people who did, though, and it's kind of, I feel really bad for them. I was surprised. If you're simple, your mind should be able to process and prepare a speech. If you prep a simple speech, if you try to talk about something simple, it should be easier for you to wrap your mind around it. If instead of talking about egoistic selflessness and the power of sacrifice, you say, you know, I'm just going to talk about how important it is for us to be us. for us to try to be who we are instead of trying to be someone else or some conglomeration of people. That's a little more simple. You don't have as much in-depth stuff to do. You can process that a lot better in the 4 minutes, even if you don't have much information. So if you don't have a very good card or you don't have very much information, definitely aim for simplicity. But try to have cards. That's the best way to avoid this. The best way to avoid getting in these bad situations is to just have a card. Have a card and things will go better for you.